Hello, Wolfpack. I'm Dan, and I'm here with two special guests today. Evelyn Vasquez, who you met last week, and Brianna Dodd, who you've known for quite a while now. Say hello, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
So today we're gonna talk to you about a few different things, and some of it's gonna be stuff you've learned about, some of it's gonna be new, and some of it was we were trying to figure out how to, put it into a lesson, and we figured like a conversation would probably provide you guys with the most valuable information. So this is what we're going to do today. And our first topic, we're going to start talking about self-awareness, which is what we've been working on all year. So here's a question for you guys. What's the point?
Of self-awareness?
Yes, sorry. What's the point of self-awareness? Why is it worth dedicating a year worth of once a week lessons to?
That I can answer. I thought you were asking what's the point of life, and I'm like, that I don't know.
Too big.
Too big. But to me, the purpose of self-awareness is, as humans, we have ideas of who we are as well as who we should be. So the more self-aware you are, the more you can make who you think you should be and who you are come closer together.
That's a good. So while you're talking about this, unscripted. So I've been thinking about stuff related to that lately, and especially like identity, right? We have this idea of who we are. Sometimes we have an idea of who we want to be, and sometimes those things are different. And so, my kind of the way that I think of it is that instead of we are, it's we become, right? I mean, you guys want to talk on that at all?
Yeah, I think that's also important to note in self-awareness, recognizing that sometimes who we are and that exact moment of time doesn't necessarily align with who we want to become. And I think that's important. Part of self-awareness is you kind of have to recognize your strengths and your weaknesses and knowing when certain things need to change.
So, sticking on self-awareness, just to kind of give our students an idea, because they all just started their self-awareness journey. What would a typical self-awareness journey look like for a person?
I think it varies from person to person, but usually I just came across this quote of accepting what you can't change and changing what you can't accept. So I think when we come to a point of not being able to accept certain things, that's when we start becoming more aware of what we like, what we don't like. You also can be self-aware of yourself at home more than you are at work, or vice versa. Aware of your feelings in one setting more than the other. So I think it depends, but I also think about the lessons that have been part of PAC period this year, right? And I think that's kind of what we're trying to tie together is being aware of what you think, how you feel, and how you're acting, learning how to take care of yourself in a way that allows you to regulate when you get heated or when you get stressed or when you get down. And ultimately being able to move your life in the direction of who you want to be.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, our students are probably, in the early part of their self-awareness journey, some, maybe years into it, depending on at what point they started to reflect on those things. But for the most part, they're probably all at the point where they're learning a lot about themselves, what they want to do, who they want to be, what they like, what makes them upset. And when it comes to self-awareness, all of those things are valuable because once you are aware of all those things about yourself, and once you have a clear idea of who you want to be, then you have like clear steps on what you need to do to become. Mm-hmm. Is that fair?
Yes.
Well said. Yeah.
I'm just paraphrasing what you guys said.
I also think, self-awareness is a lifelong process. It's not something that you're going to be able to just like get better at instantly and be good at it always. Sometimes you're definitely going to have relapses. You're going to have places where you're like, no, I absolutely deny that that's who I am. And I'm already that point, and that may or may not be true. But, you know, as you move forward and just take the time to really think about what you want and who you are and those things that you feel are necessary to change, right? It's a slow process, and you're just going to always be better. You're going to become better at it as time goes on.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. It's like, so self-awareness, it's not like, you know, I could practice, and 3 months later, boom, I did it. You know, it's one of those things where we become, like, we change constantly, and who we want to be changes, and the things that we like change, and everything changes. So we kind of have to be open to that. But in order to do it in a way that's purposeful, we have to be aware of what we want, and all of the other things that we've talked about. So that's a good point. So this kind of brings me into what we've been talking about most recently, is control, right? And so we've done quite a few lessons on control, what we can, what we can't control. Is there anything that you guys want to touch on that we haven't really covered so far?
Well, just so our students are aware, Evelyn and I are two mental health professionals who have been helping to create some of the PAC lessons with Dan and with some teachers, and we're working behind the scenes, and then he makes
immensely helpful.
I'm glad. But one thing we really wanted to tackle with our students that is also a lifelong process is learning to, when you think about your locus of control, what's in my control, what's out of my control, it's not just about owning the things that are in your control. It's also learning to accept the things that you don't have ultimate power over. We can influence a lot of things in our life, but there are certain things that I have to accept about myself. If you ever see me around campus, I'm almost 6 feet tall. I cannot change that. Well, actually, I guess I could, but not in a non-painful way. So it was something that growing up, I was always the tallest person, not just the tallest female, the tallest person. And I hated it. But I had to come to accept that you're a giant, and that's okay. And there are other things that maybe I can change or I can affect that help me become what I envision myself to be, that I have to make a choice to commit to changes to reach that goal. It's this idea of acceptance versus commitment.
Yeah. Evelyn, any thoughts?
Well, I had a really good idea, and then it faded away. And it had to do with, like, the piece around acceptance, and how, right, there's a difference between, like, accepting what you can and cannot control, and, like, doing something to change the things that you can. But I totally lost it, and it was good too, I remember.
You did, though, just spark my memory. I think there's also a difference between accepting what I have the power to change versus what I don't have complete power over changing, that I don't have complete control over. Oh no, you're contagious. I kind of lost my train of thought too.
Well, I'll jump in before it happens to me then. So since we started talking about acceptance, and I think, Brianna, you were getting to the point of, you know, sometimes we'll have to accept things that we can control but don't want to do, and sometimes we'll have to accept things that we can't, right? So there are definitely going to be situations in my life where I'm not happy with how something is happening, but then I have to, you know, make that choice. Do I care about it enough that I'm going to put all the time and effort into making it how I want to make it, or is it really not that bad, and I'd rather not have anything to do with it? You know what I mean? I'd rather live with this situation that I don't love, but if it's not too stressful for me and it doesn't affect me too negatively, I might just accept that that's how it is and be okay with it.
Right.
Yeah, and that definitely kind of sparks where I was thinking of going. So there's a thin line between, right, like if this is something that I absolutely cannot stand and like I need to change the situation, if I can't control it, then right, there are ways of, or is if it's slightly doable, right? So there are ways around like acceptance and using the coping like strategies that we've been like providing the students throughout the year, right? Meditation, breathing techniques, doing all of those little activities were things that kind of help you decide, is this something that I can actually handle with a little bit of extra support, or is this something that I need to take myself out of the situation altogether because it's not benefiting me in any way by thinking about it and fixating and focusing on all of the negative in like that specific situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think acceptance can really come into play, of weighing the cons and pros and cons.
Well, and you helped me remember the part I had forgotten, which is, I think the reason acceptance is such a large topic that is so broad is it applies to many, many things in life. As far as, okay, let's say it's a situation like a natural disaster. That's a pretty clear cut. I control certain parts, but there's a lot of things out of my control that I have very little influence over. But there's also the emotional part of it. I think about how often, and I'm speaking from personal experience, we can take the things that other people say that might have been just plain neutral statements. They didn't mean anything by it, but our brains want to take it personally.
Mm-hmm.
And I might have to make a conscious choice not to accept that and to say, no, thank you. That's not what was meant by that. Or if it was meant that way, I know that's not true. I don't need that thought. Mm-hmm. So I think that's also where this choice aspect that we're all working on our whole lives comes in.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, so to kind of segue into choice, I'd like to try and, summarize, I think, all of our points here about acceptance. So it sounds like acceptance kind of needs reflection, right? So we're in a situation and we're not happy with it, and we've got to take the time to reflect on a number of different things, right? How unhappy is it making me? Are there things that I can do to change it? How much of my effort is it going to take? Am I willing to put that effort in? Am I? Okay, I need to do that. Am I not willing to do that? Okay, then I need to accept that that's what the situation is, right? And so I think that's kind of where we're getting to that choice aspect now is, once we reflected on the situation, now we have the choice of, are we going to act on it or are we going to accept it, right? So what are your guys' thoughts on that and on choice?
Well said.
Yeah, that was good.
Go ahead, Evelyn.
Well, thinking about like those things that, right. He said, how much effort do I need to put into change? How much like effort would it take me? How much drive, motivation will I need in order to make change, right? And that's a choice that each of us have to make individually about anything. And that's, I really think, where our values and personal goals come into play. And so this idea of, is it worth it? Is it worth it to make those small incremental steps to create the person that you want to become or the situation that you would like to live in?
Mm-hmm.
I also think with choice, this is where it again, I think, Dan, you had said something about reflection. It's just being able to reflect. And oftentimes there will be things that I think I want to achieve, or there are things that, oh, I think I want to be a journalist. And then I go to college, I take one journalism class and I hate it, and I become a psychologist. Like, you pivot, and that's okay. It's just constantly weighing, is this a big change, medium change, small change? How much effort do I need to make this change? And I think it's then committing to the change you choose to make. It's one of the most empowering feelings you can have, making a decision and having complete control over the feeling of commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you achieve your goal or not based on outside factors, or you get into it and you're like, wow, I hate this. Never mind. Just kidding. That's okay, because it doesn't feel like you failed. It feels like you learned something.
Mm-hmm.